India Inc. is a lot more ready now than it was in April when we first published our report, Future of Audit in India. At that time, there was only about 50% of India Inc. that had done something and 50% that had done nothing on auditor rotation. Today, I'd say that number is down to only about 20% that is yet to do anything from what was 82% back in April when we first launched this report. Absolutely not. There is no reason for quality of audit to be compromised. It provides the opportunity for a fresh perspective, and a fresh perspective is always beneficial, particularly with the number of changes India Inc. is going through. That would help. Quality of audit can get compromised if it ends up being a change only in legal form, but not a change in substance. To get the maximum benefit from the change is to actually try and maximize the change. So try and make a real change. I think the negative repercussions really are around selecting a firm that's not appropriate, that sees the accounts for the first time, that is not aware of past judgments or critical calls that have been taken in the past, that has not seen the transition from Indian GAAP to Ind AS that the company went through. What were the key changes? What were some of the judgments again that were made on that transition? And therefore, how do you avoid that is what's most important. And I think that comes down into 3 or 4 things. First of all, starting early in the process. If companies haven't started already, they need to start now. If CFOs haven't have had the discussion with the promoters, with the management, with the audit committees or boards on what sort of process to follow, have that discussion. Lay out a clear process, and there's some choices in process itself. The choices are, how many firms should one be talking to, and what sort of firms should one be talking to. I think if done right, what auditor rotation will lead to is enhanced independence, is a fresh perspective for companies, is perhaps much more value add from the auditors, because auditors will now not take audit relationships for granted. They're not relationships into perpetuity. They are now there for 10 years, and therefore you need to demonstrate value add to client within, to the client within that time. You need to also make it commercial for yourself within that time. Overall, will lead to more efficient and effective capital markets. That's what an audit eventually is there for. It's not just a compliance, and I think a lot of times firms don't understand that. I think the implication on the profession of mandatory audit firm rotation is going to be a consolidation, which is not a bad thing. I think there are more than 1,000 firms in India that sign off at least one public interest entity today. And one will see consolidation into sub-100, I would say, firms that would sign up public interest entities. And that's a good thing. I think what will not be a good thing is if that number comes down to a handful, to something you can count on your fingertips. India needs a large number, but not 1,000. I think the future of audit is obviously added complexity. We live in a complex world. Shorter reporting time frames is what the investor community demands. I remember in an audit you're reporting on historical periods every quarter, every year end, and those periods are shortening with with systems as they are moving, with media as it's moving. People want information quicker at their fingertips, and audit needs to support that evolution. Audit also needs to support the evolution to provide more forward-looking insights, and I think there is a lot of move in that direction. Audit needs to support more opinions on sustainability, on impact beyond numbers. The complexity and the amount of change in standards, in regulations has really changed over the last couple of years. There are 2 ways to look at that. One, that there's this huge amount of change and it's difficult to deal with. The second is that this is a part of life, and I think times to come will show that this has to become a way of life. Even though we've moved to Ind AS, the standards themselves are not static. From 1st January 18, the new revenue standard, Ind AS 115, will become applicable, which is an entirely new way. The whole world will look at revenue recognition for the first time. And therefore, change has to become a part of life. And therefore, CFOs and their teams need to find a way on how to learn from the change. What did they do well? What did they do poorly with any of these changes? GST, Ind AS, mandatory firm rotation, and how to better manage change in the future.